Previously on Baldur's Gate 3.
Dishonor! Dishonor on your whole family!
Unclog your hole.
Are as thick as they come, sweetness. Here.
Yummy.
And there you have it.
Rancid donkey scrotum!
I am Murgle, Lord of Bones. And you have slain my chosen.
We could reshape the world.
The plains thus quake, and the gods shudder.
End of Flashback.
Baldur's Gate 3, a brutal saga of unending savagery, soul-crushing choices, and world-ending consequences. Welcome to the final episode of my Jack-of-all-trades honor mode campaign, where our Machiavellian protagonist, Squidward, must survive a fantasy world that seems personally offended by his mere existence. There is only one save file, no second chances, and a single party wipe spells the end of my entire campaign. Squidward must do all of this while also putting one level in all 12 classes to earn the Jack-of-all-trades achievement. So, with death lurking behind every dialogue choice and danger at every turn, let's dive back into Squidward's life of struggles in Baldur's Gate 3's honor mode. General Ketheric Thorm, the Boner Lord himself, has now been turned to dust, but the Absolute's army continues their march on Baldur's Gate. Squidward and friends leave behind the devastated battlefields of Act 2 worse off than when they first arrived, but truth be told, it was a terrible place to begin with, so it's no skin off Squidward's turquoise back. Anyways, we get treated to a cutscene of the remaining two Chosens bickering about losing control of their giant brain, now that Squidward has control over one of their magical netherstones. They seem to be cooking up some nefarious plan to get back their precious rock, but Squidward is just chilling out and taking in the scenery. But just when Squidward was about to get some sleep, the magic D20 in his back pocket turned into a portal that allowed some angry Githyanki monks to ambush the party. My unprepared band of sleeping beauties kinda got their cheeks clapped by these psychic brawlers, but I slowly realized that there was a giant timer on the right side of my screen telling me to run through the portal, and that allowed me to skip the battle altogether. Now that my adventuring party had some time to gather their wits, they began to jump through the zero-gravity environment of the Astral Prism, where our Dream Guardian seems to be under attack by the Githyanki. We were able to reach the epicenter of the battle, where we found a fellow cephalopod who seemed to need Squidward's help. This Mind Flayer is apparently the true form of our Dream Guardian friend, and has been using the towers of the trapped Githyanki prince to prevent the Absolute from turning Squidward and company into mindless thralls. So that was a fairly strong sales pitch from my tentacled associate, and the Githyanki have historically been nothing but bullies to me.
Together, we can turn the tide.
So I opted to side with the Emperor and wipe out the Githyanki invaders. The battle went smoothly, and Orpheus, the Githyanki prince, was put back to sleep. The Emperor regaled us with his origin story of how he became a Mind Flayer, and how he eventually broke free from the Absolute's control. Lord Enver Gortash, the guy with messy hair and stubble, had sent him to retrieve the Astral Prism, but once the Emperor laid his hands on it, or tentacles on it, his free will was restored. Seizing the opportunity, he hid inside the magical D20 and began plotting the downfall of the three Chosen and the Absolute. After the storytime session was over, the Emperor gave Squidward a magic tadpole that could enhance his Mind Flayer powers. This was an easy choice to make, since Squidward is already an octopus, so growing a few more tentacles was not a problem. The Emperor also gave unsolicited analysis of my brain by calling me a special needs kid.
Your mind is truly something special.
But that's just another Tuesday for me. As Squidward opened his mind to the astral tadpole, I knew this transformation wasn't going to be pretty. But hey, as SpongeBob once said,
I'm ugly and I'm proud! I'm ugly and I'm proud!
and that's the energy that we're bringing into this nightmare. Squidward, being the generous guy that he is, made the rounds and convinced all his friends that Ceramorphosis is a great experience, and being ugly is actually a virtue in this day and age. So after inflicting body horror on my comrades, it was time to hit the sack alongside all the dead Githyanki bodies still bleeding out around the campfire. I suppose the unique aroma of decaying corpses adds to the bedtime experience. Once we woke up and got out of the campsite, we were granted with the charming atmosphere of Rivington, a town on the outskirts of Baldur's Gate. As we walked down the dirt road, Squidward encountered a little girl who needed help finding her lost mother. I decided to use my special ranger class dialogue to offer her assistance, but then something about herbs popped up and I succeeded in a nature skill check which told me that Yenna's mom is probably toast. This turn of events locked Squidward out of all the other dialogue options, and I am now forced to give my hard-earned cash to this newly minted orphan. All this guilt-tripping prompts Minthara to start ranting about politics and how refugees should be used as slave labor and military fodder, which, you know, is fair enough.
The city might allow them to earn their freedom one day.
After Minthara's crash course in ethics, we ran into a posh guy with a feathered top hat going on a tirade about squatters in his house. I was able to spook the guy by mentioning organized religion, which he seemed to resent more than the freeloading tenants. But doing all of these good deeds didn't achieve much for Squidward. Right now, the priority is beefing up for all the fights to come, and the best way to do that is by picking off some unsuspecting Flaming Fist guardsmen. Yeah, sure, they're guarding the city from the Absolute's forces, but I like to think that consolidating our assets into a higher level Squidward is probably the wisest investment moving forward. So once again, Squidward and company grind the poor NPCs into a fine paste, with each body that hits the floor valued at about 200 points of experience. Our little murder spree did not go unnoticed, and more Flaming Fist soldiers soon showed up. They were able to hurt my party a bit, but ultimately paid the iron price by filling my XP bar just as their friends did before them. When I was done with my level maxing grind, I encountered a funny bald smith who seemed to like killing people. I decided to engage in some small talk with the guy, only to realize that this was not your everyday baldy. He was actually Orin, the chosen of Baal, in disguise. The crazy lady with no pupils then told me that killing Gortash first would be a fun thing to do, and I agree with that sentiment. But after she blinked away, the real Smith showed up and accused Squidward of assaulting his bald dome piece. I managed to convince him that he'd suffered severe brain damage, so his memories are unreliable and legally inadmissible. But after getting slandered by a fellow baldy in broad daylight, I felt it was fair to take some recompense from his shop for all my troubles. After getting all of those items on sale, I decided to investigate some children's gifts that were stuffed to the gills with hidden explosives. The Flaming Fists are clearly terrible at their jobs, so I made the executive decision to liquidate their lives and reinvest their assets into a more promising portfolio, Squidward's yellow bar of experience. But in the world of business, you can only get so far by yourself. Eventually, you're gonna need some contacts. And as luck would have it, we met up with an old acquaintance in the form of the strange talking ox that we met in the Druid's Grove all the way back in Act 1. He asked us to help smuggle him inside the walls of Baldur's Gate, and that he would transform into an apple that could be discreetly carried by Squidward into the city. Of course, this was a brilliant networking opportunity for my team of entrepreneurs, and we allowed our old friend to hitch a ride in Squidward's back pocket. I also encountered a fresh squid face that was in need of some sustenance, and so Squidward, working hard to gain some social capital, whipped out a leftover corpse that we kept from Moonrise Towers. Apparently the staleness of the body didn't seem to bother the new guy, even though the previous episode of the series took me forever to make. Climbing the social ladder has never been easier, so naturally Squidward, in a rare act of modesty, commissions a giant statue of himself to honor his unparalleled artistic talent. This stony masterpiece will likely be the first of many when Squidward and the gang save Baldur's Gate and transform it into a utopia. But first things first, we still need to gain access to the lower city, and to do that, we're gonna need an admissions pass. Snooping around town, we encounter a tiny golden elephant chastising an even tinier lady. Ostensibly, one of the refugees went ballistic and murdered the leader of the local temple, according to the elephant detective. Still, the tiny lady believes that there is more to this case than meets the eye. And this gives Squidward the chance to potentially help the lazy elephant solve this murder case and maybe hitch a ride on his miniature wings into Baldur's Gate. It wasn't long before Squidward found the murder weapon alongside some murder cultists while having a stand-up comedy session with a rotting corpse who tried to infect me with his laughter like an STD. But Squidward is simply built different, and his octopoid biology was able to break the insidious curse. Armed with new evidence to show the golden elephant, Squidward and the gang headed to Wyrms Crossing, where a Flaming Fist checkpoint stood in their way. The border guards turned out to be quite corrupt and demanded payment for access. Fortunately, Squidward was absolutely loaded from all of the involuntary discounts that he received from the free market. Unfortunately, the checkpoint inspection was not over even after I paid the bribe, and a steel watcher came over to vet Squidward for past crimes.
It has seen the deep shadows of Grimforge, and the stone floors left bloodied. It knows the cold walls of Moonrise Towers, and the cultists who fell there.
Regrettably, Squidward has quite a few skeletons in his closet, especially in regards to the cult of the Absolute, which the Steel Watch is technically part of because they were built by Gortash. So the day of reckoning has finally arrived. I felt compelled to immediately surrender since this was honor mode and my party was still chilling at level 10. Honestly, doing time in Baldur's Gate 3 feels less like a sentence and more like doing the dishes. It's annoying, time-consuming, but never really punishing. Luckily, Squidward didn't have to do any chores at all this day, as a few anti-law enforcement deep gnomes showed up to stun-lock the Steel Watcher, and we were able to slip through. However, I still felt a little salty from having 200 gold pieces snatched away from me by the underhanded Flaming Fist, so I decided to make up for my lost coin by dismissing some of the guards on the wooden wall, which no one seemed to mind. After recouping my lost value, I went to visit the rebel Ironhand gnomes and thank them for bailing me out. Turns out their leader is Wolbrin, another fellow Baldy I helped out back in Act 2. The Ironhand gnomes have formed a resistance group fighting back against Gortash's tyrannical rule, which makes them natural allies to Squidward and his merry band of equally radical nutjobs. He then informs us that he has crafted something called a rune powder bomb, an explosive device capable of leveling the building where the Steel Watchers are being manufactured. This was an offer I simply could not refuse. After all, explosive firepower has been the solution to pretty much every other problem we faced in honor mode up to this point, so of course I graciously accepted this generous commission of terrorism. Now with all of these requests piling up, it was about time to get a move on. Squidward and his group of insurgents made their way to a brothel, where they met up with a feathered top hat named Arthur. I briefed him on the fact that his toy donations to refugee children were stuffed with explosives, and that's a big no-no in Baldur's Gate. He tries to bribe me to drop the matter, but Squidward understands the art of the deal like no other and pushes for more concessions. I played the talk or I kill you card and it worked like a charm on poor old Arthur. He crumpled like a wet paper bag and spilled the beans. Turns out a suspicious fireworks shop is behind the combustible toys. To seal the deal, Arthur handed over a pass to the lower city, so naturally I repaid his generosity by mugging him for all his gold. A classic win-win. Another patron of the same brothel is Detective Valeria, my favorite lazy elephant. I hand over new evidence of the murder at the temple, including a dagger dripping with the blood of the former head priest. I also took the time to give proof that a resurgent Ballist cult is picking targets off a list one by one to gain the favor of their dark deity. The lethargic sleuth then decides to give me another admission pass to the lower city to continue my good work, which I didn't really need at this point, but the conversation did give me enough experience to crack level 11. Squidward has come so far, with only 2 undipped classes remaining. For level 11, I chose the Monk class over the Paladin, since I felt like I was going to engage in a lot of unlawful behavior in my very near future, and didn't want to become an Oathbreaker accidentally, which might mess up my Jack-of-all-trades achievement. Also, Squidward is a dexterity build, so having a bonus action flurry of blows that does a decent amount of damage is not a bad way to maximize Squidward's utility as a generalist. Just one more level up and I'll finally fulfill my dream of obtaining the Jack-of-all-trades achievement. To celebrate this milestone, I decided to go rob some more goods before finally heading towards the drawbridge to Wyrms Rock. I go and flash my fancy admissions tickets to the bridge staff, but they couldn't help but roast Squidward's appearance one last time before lowering the bridge.
You don't look the posh sort.
The party heads towards the gates of Wyrms Rock, but soon get abruptly stopped by another steel watcher. This time around, things are surprisingly civil. We even get a formal invitation from Gortash himself to attend his grand inauguration as Archduke of Baldur's Gate. It's always nice to be recognized by the local tyrant, but I make an executive decision to skip out on attending his ceremony, since I want my first meeting with Gortash to double as his retirement party. But before such grand acts of regicide can take place, I still need to up my social capital in the city. So I head down to the dungeons of Wyrms Rock and find a sleeping flaming fist all by their lonesome. This is why you don't slack off on your job when you're worth 200 EXP. However, there is a greater purpose to this prison field trip. I'm here to catch up with an old friend from Act 1. Counselor Floric seems to have fallen on hard times and is currently down in the dumps due to her failures in life. But good guy Squidward is here to save the day by threatening to beat her if she doesn't cheer up, and help me fight a giant floating brain. This tough love seemed to have been received well by the shackled counselor, and I quickly unlocked her cell doors before the guards could spot me. I realized that Floric was a pretty strong mage that was now under my control, and I felt the inner min-maxer call out to me. I tell Gale to use minor illusion to gather all of the unsuspecting prison guards in one location and prepared for a brawl. Floric got her Cone of Cold counterspelled, which threw a wrench in my beautiful ambush, but it was fine since Gale is her but better. We eventually wiped the prison floor clean of the bumbling flaming fist and dashed to freedom with the counselor in tow.
This is far enough.
Having made a new friend, I decided to go and check if there were any other spots to farm some more EXP, and I happened to cross paths with a nervous gnome who seemed to be up to no good. Squidward accuses the pipsqueak of being a thief, and he basically admits that he was going to rob his flaming fist comrades while they slept in their beds. Raynash the thief wants the gold to hire smugglers to get him out of Baldur's Gate before the war with the Absolute breaks out. Squidward knows a coward when he sees one and opts to squeeze a deserter for all he's worth before sneak attacking him in the backside. This battle woke up the sleeping fists, but they were still in their pajamas and lacked any weapons. This turn of events went better than initially expected, and I was able to treat myself to some more free experience points before heading into the lower city of Baldur's Gate. Spawning on the other side of the entrance gate, my strange ox that turned into an apple thanked me for my 5-star delivery service and officially joined my growing roster of mismatched allies for the final showdown. I've recruited a few buddies to help save the world, but let's not get lazy. This experience bar isn't going to fill itself, so I'll keep milking every easy opportunity that I get. I make my way up a stone wall and begin luring in some unsuspecting flaming fist guards with the power of minor illusion spam. Knifing them down one by one brought Squidward a deep sense of inner peace, because not only does habitual bloodshed boost his XP, it also clears the streets of nosy busybodies, making it way easier to pickpocket vendors without all the unnecessary witnesses. Alternating back to signal boosting my social credit score, I decided to chat up a pirate captain about the disappearance of a little girl. Captain Grizzly seemed pretty enthused to meet a Giga Chat with Squidward.
Why, hello.
But apparently did not see any girl in her bar. The captain then spills some juicy gossip about the girl's mother, Laura, claiming that she used to be a pirate and might be making this whole situation up, due to her being completely unhinged. She also heavily insinuated that she'd be more than happy to pay for Squidward's premium problem-solving services, and Squidward, being the EXP-hungry menace that he is, didn't need much convincing to take the pirate captain up on her offer.
You've got yourself a deal.
After tracking down Laura's residence, I decided it's time for a little friendly interrogation to see if she can offer us a better deal than Captain Grizzly and maybe save her own skin in the process. Laura rambles on about her shady past and eventually breaks down in tears, but unfortunately for her, emotional vulnerability doesn't count as legal tender. So Squidward and his morally flexible associates do the humane thing and put the wacky lady out of her misery, then casually stroll back to Captain Grizzly to collect payment for a job well done. But plot twists abound. Captain Grizzly turns out to be a familiar green face from Act 1, Auntie Ethel. The hag seems to have gained a few pounds, but in the end, a deal is a deal, and I pressed Ethel for recognition of my hard work.
Still a little shit, I see. Thank you.
Turns out, the extra log she's carrying around her belly is actually a late-stage hag pregnancy from eating Laura's daughter. In her vulnerable state, Auntie Ethel would much rather be left alone, and naturally offers Squidward another one of her grand bargains. This time, I don't even have to lift a finger, she promises to fight by our side during the big confrontation with the Absolute. When the time comes, having the walking embodiment of ugly and proud in our corner might just be the best decision I made all game, and so I gladly accept the hag's offer once again.
You'll have me.
After all the wheeling and dealing, Squidward and the gang are just shy of hitting level 12, which is the signal to blow some people up. So we pay a visit to an extremely suspicious fireworks shop our for ratted out, only to uncover a factory of death run by Gortash's bayonet goons. I concluded that the only acceptable course of action was to chuck a fireball into their OSHA violating workplace and let poor safety standards do the rest. After the smoke cleared, I graciously stepped in to finish off the crispy survivors, and as I admired the flaming wreckage, I realized that Squidward only needed 107 more points of experience to fulfill his destiny. So I quickly began spamming Minor Illusion, dragging in the remaining fireworks staff upstairs so that I could cut them down one by one. Each body hitting the floor vindicated my bloodthirsty efforts, and at long last I heard the sweet ding of this campaign's final level up. Squidward has reached level 12, with the final class being the Honorable Paladin. Notably, it gives Squidward access to 3rd level spell slots and a Channel Oath power. I chose the Oath of the Crown subclass because Squidward is a king and deserves no less. At long last, after all the trials, tribulations, and tomfoolery, the first half of the series' grand mission is complete. The Jack of all trades achievement is finally mine, a badge of honor earned by only 2.9% of players as of recording. It's been a long journey, but now my momentum is real. Squidward has reached his fullest potential, and with all 12 classes under his belt, there is no more fear, no more hesitation. Back on the crime-infested streets of Baldur's Gate, I chose to pay a visit to the local Thieves Guild to see if I could pawn off some of Squidward's illegal contraband. But when I walked down the stairs, I was greeted with a gang war between the Zentarum and the Guild. I didn't really get a chance to pick sides as the Zentarum were instantly hostile to Squidward's presence. After a quick bout of NPC violence, we were able to mop up the unruly mercenaries, which gave Squidward the chance to speak with the Guildmaster. Regrettably, discrimination is alive and well in Baldur's Gate, and the Guildmaster was unwilling to speak with Squidward's ugly mug until I greased the wheels of diplomacy by transferring ownership of some of my ill-gotten goods. Eventually, I was able to convince the crime boss to engage in parley, and making use of Squidward's silver tongue, was able to successfully persuade the Guildmaster to join in Squidward's noble crusade against the Absolute. As my network of allies continued to grow, I realized it was time to consolidate my forces around people I could actually trust. So this time, I focused my efforts on helping Shadowheart usurp control of the local Sharn enclave. We arrive at the House of Grief, a Sharn-controlled daycare center for people who want to forget their traumatic memories. The attendants tell us to go to a small room and wait there for some shady ritual to begin. Squidward and his ambitious peers awkwardly sat in silence until a mysterious hooded lady appeared out of thin air. The mystery lady began throwing shade at Shadowheart for not retrieving the astral prism, which revealed that the hooded figure was Viconia, Mother Superior, leader of Shar's faithful in this city. The Mother Superior instructs us to head down to the basement, and with her cryptic blessing, a secret wall slides open to reveal our path forward. As we made our way down through their hidden villain lair, we encountered a large arena with a bunch of Sharn acolytes standing there menacingly. With my gamer instincts, I could deduce that this was probably a boss fight of some kind, and elected to go back up and snipe a few more bad guys outside of their coliseum. The good old gimmick of Minor Illusion never fails to impress, and I was able to take down 5 Sharn warriors before any enemy reinforcements could arrive. I realized that this long corridor was the perfect choke point to safely whittle away the Sharn horde from afar, and so I began to lay the groundwork. Their strength in numbers meant nothing if they were forced to go through an icy gauntlet that staggered their movements while being gassed by Gale's Cloud Kill spell. While their troops were bogged down by difficult terrain and slipping hazards, my band of archers rained down elemental arrows to thin their ranks as they approached. The plan still had a few holes, mainly the Sharans teleporting around and casting darkness everywhere, which blocked our line of sight, but flashy tricks aside, the fight was decidedly one-sided, in Squidward's favor. Eventually, the Mother Superior herself made it to the front of the conga line, and I gave her a piece of Squidward's mind for having such a poor reception to the future saviors of Baldur's Gate. Finally, after a bit more elbow grease and generous application of violence, I cleared out the corridor of all the religious zealots. Beyond the obvious boss arena, I stumbled upon an old couple chained up like they were starring in some very questionable basement drama. Turns out that these old fogies are actually Shadowheart's parents, and Char wants her to slice and dice them to earn her promotion as the new boss of this edgy daycare. Shadowheart turns to Squidward for some moral guidance on whether murdering both her parents is the right move, and naturally Squidward enthusiastically recommends that double parricide is the right fit for her professional goals.
Double kill.
After adding a bunch of religious extremists to my growing alliance, I figured it was only fair to diversify further by recruiting the local bomb-making terrorist group known as the Iron Hand Gnomes. But in order to gain their trust, I first need to blow up the foundry that churns out the Steel Watchers. Singing past the Bayonet guards at the gate, I stumbled upon a bunch of hapless Gondian gnomes slaving away at the factory floor. Their bosses weren't exactly winning Employer of the Month, forcing the Gondians into endless overtime, with the help of some stylish accessories such as magical collars rigged to blow their gnomish heads off if they dare to complain about working conditions. Squidward slips through the production lines and gets to the back of the foundry, where he meets a blind Gondian by the name of Xander Tubin. The gnome explains that the reason that they aren't staging a breakout is because the overseers are holding their families hostage. Squidward, however, isn't exactly moved. This turquoise octopus is no stranger to wiping out entire bloodlines when the mood strikes, so I kindly informed the blind gnome that maybe the world would be a better place if both the Steel Watch and their creators got permanently decommissioned, preferably with a rune powder bomb for that dramatic flair. I push aside the useless gnome and infiltrate deeper into the underground level of the foundry, where I use a greater invisibility scroll on Squidward to avoid detection. Levitating across the industrial landscape, I began my search for a passageway to the heart of the foundry. I strolled past bubbling metal smelters and chattering gnomes, casually pocketed a tadpole sitting on the table like free candy, and eventually stumbled upon a giant metal gate that led me straight to my target, the control center. I was quite confident in Squidward's ability to lockpick just about anything, but I didn't account for the fact that a cutscene would spring out and break my greater invisibility, revealing Squidward's tentacles for the world to see. I was able to unlock the door with ease, but that triggered the tolling of the bell, which alerted everyone in the foundry to Squidward's presence. A fancy steel watcher jogs his way down the stairs to give Squidward a smack. Luckily, the shield spell was there to deflect the blow. This bought enough time for Squidward to go through the big doors and enter the control center antechamber, leaving behind all of the riffraff and screaming gnomes to deal with their own problems. Squidward had reached the control center, and luckily for him, the security detail here was about as competent as the Flaming Fist. With a quick swig of a potion of invisibility, I flew across the strangely fleshy floors without any steel watchers noticing Squidward's existence. Then, using my telepathic powers, I had Gale pop back to camp and magically teleport the rune powder bomb from my traveling chest straight into Squidward's pockets. At long last, Squidward arrived at the neural switchboard, the perfect spot to prep the rune powder bomb and turn the foundry into a smoking crater. It was only after hearing the ticking sound that Squidward realized that he should probably start running if he didn't want to end up as a fried calamari. Miraculously, the rest of the party teleported to his side, and together we began our dramatic Hollywood-esque escape from the soon-to-be doomed foundry. Our intrepid band of heroes made it out in one piece, and somehow Tubin, the blind gnome, managed to stumble his way to safety as well. As the foundry erupted in flames behind us, Wyrms stood there clapping like a proud dad at a school play, thoroughly impressed by Squidward's latest fireworks display. Wyrms congratulates us for destroying both the foundry and the Steel Watch, but mentions that we have unfinished business in the form of the blind Gondian. Tubin tries to worm his way out by sobbing about his freshly deceased daughter, but Squidward knows better than to let loose ends fester.
You're insane.
He called Squidward a psycho, but tried telling me something I don't know. We finished off the last Gondian in short order, and Wyrms, witnessing the savage display against the blind, seemed thoroughly impressed and is now willing to join my coalition. With the Steel Watch out of commission, Lord Gortash is at his weakest, which means it's prime time to strike, but before diving headfirst into a boss fight, I figured it would be wise to pay a quick visit to my neighborhood devil worshipper. Hellsick is notorious for smuggling people into the Nine Hells for a price, and apparently Gortash himself once used her services. I asked if she could sneak me into Raphael's House of Hope, since I've heard that he's hoarding a stash of magical goodies that could make my life a lot easier. She tried to scam me out of 20,000 gold pieces, but I countered with an offer of my own: my services as a tentacled kleptomaniac who has successfully robbed pretty much every merchant in Baldur's Gate. Honestly, it's a miracle this city still has an economy. Hellsick was willing to take me up on the offer, but she wanted the gauntlets of Hill Giant strength in exchange for handing over all the ingredients needed to bake myself a fresh portal straight into hell. And so the pact was sealed. I headed upstairs to perform the ritual, and once the portal was complete, Squidward and his band of thrill seekers dove headfirst into Avernus, where the House of Hope awaits us. As soon as we land in the first layer of hell, we are greeted by a bipolar red spirit named Hope, who is paranoid about getting slapped around by Raphael once he gets home. She hands us some hideous costumes that will allow us to blend in with the other damned souls to not raise any alarm bells. Disguised and ready, we strut onwards to Raphael's archives, where all the juicy loot is waiting to be liberated. While my party distracted the archivist on the other side of the room, Squidward got to work disarming the pressure plates under both the gauntlets of Hill Giant strength and the amulet of greater health. With the traps disabled and the archivist still blissfully unaware, I swiped both items and slithered away without so much as a raised eyebrow. Unfortunately for Hope, I have no intention of freeing her, and I also never cared about honoring Helsic's deal. These gauntlets are going straight into my collection of unused magical items back in camp. But the biggest prize for me is this fancy amulet, as it allows Squidward to bring up his constitution from 16 all the way to 23, which will increase his armor class due to the effects of unarmored defense and also give Squidward some more hit points. I was also able to pilfer the Helldusk helmet, which gives Squidward crit immunity, meaning I can now toss out my old adamantine shield and equip a better one like Viconia's Walking Fortress. Now Squidward is a really beefy tank with 171 hit points and an armor class of 24, alongside all the other miscellaneous spells that I gained throughout this campaign. Now that we're fully geared up, it's finally time to decapitate the head of state. Sneaking in through the back door, I take a peek inside Gortash's inauguration ceremony that I skipped earlier, and I can practically feel the murderous intent radiating from all the angry red dots on my minimap. There was no diplomacy to be had here, so I began my preparations to take the tyrant down once and for all. I cast Greater Invisibility and popped an Elixir of Vigilance on Squidward as he flies straight into the lion's den. Squidward is now deep behind enemy lines, in the perfect spot to play a little game of explosive Jenga. I plopped down a giant box of fireworks right next to Gortash, stacked it with a smoke powder barrel on top, and to my dismay, this broke Squidward's Greater Invisibility. But apparently everyone in this room is as blind as a bat because Squidward's cover somehow remains intact. I gave Squidward the Elixir of Vigilance in anticipation of his invisibility being broken, which gives a +5 modifier to Squidward's initiative roll. This combined with an already high dexterity score would have hopefully allowed Squidward to be the first one to act in combat, but I guess all that prep work didn't need to happen because the big box of fireworks blocks everyone's line of sight, which is probably the best outcome that could have happened. With none the wiser, Squidward is able to finish building his volatile tower. I pop a potion of invisibility and fly to higher ground, where I can now safely detonate all of the explosives with a bomb strapped to my arrow. A fiery inferno engulfed the audience hall, instantly killing the Supreme Marshal of the Flaming Fist and incinerating the attendees who were standing a bit too close to the Archduke. Unfortunately, Gortash somehow survived the explosive sneak attack, but luckily all of my enemies are surprised, which means I get an additional turn to lay the smackdown on everyone before they get a chance to fight back. My other party members are still free to skulk around, so I positioned Lae'zel right behind Gortash, who got flung to the doorway. I attacked him with a concussive smash, which did enough damage to trigger phase 2 of this boss fight. Gortash became the Avatar of Tyranny, and in doing so gained a bunch of temporary hit points, obtained immunity to certain damage types, grew in size, and summoned a bunch of shadow minions that increased the strength of nearby enemies. An invisible Gale joins the fray and casts Ice Storm on Gortash, chipping away at the boss's temporary hit points. But in retaliation, Gale gets afflicted with Tyrannical Curse, which basically blows Gale up in 2 turns if I don't get rid of it. My final unseen party member, Minthara, now gets in on the action and flies straight for Gortash's throat with a blinding smite. Minthara's weapon was also coated with a brewed up belly glummer, which inflicts the poison condition on Gortash, giving him disadvantage on all of his rolls. After all of that, I let Gortash take his turn, where he tries to cast something, but Gale counterspells it, and so the Archduke resorts to using his fists to tickle Lae'zel. Lae'zel responds by using a trip attack to knock Gortash to the ground, giving advantage to all subsequent melee attacks. With this golden opportunity, Lae'zel uses Action Surge to repeatedly smash Gortash's body further into the ground. I continue the shellacking with a Blight spell from Gale, which brings the Archduke's health bar down to dangerous levels. I finally pass the turn, and the concussive grenades from Gortash's wall-mounted dispensers actually help clean up the Flaming Fist for me. The start of a new round begins, and this is Squidward's moment to shine. He shoots out an anti-magic arrow to prevent any tomfoolery, then levitates down to Gortash's mutilated form to bring his clenched tentacles down on the tyrant's face. Gortash is now down to only 6 hit points, and he makes the fatal mistake of using a spell, which Squidward riposts with Psionic Backlash, blasting the brains of the Archduke on his own turn. Taking down the Chosen of Bane also vaporizes little shadow minions, meaning it's a clean sweep from here on out. Without the Steel Watchers, the now leaderless Flaming Fists folded like wet toilet paper, and the bodyguards of the toasted aristocrats didn't fare much better. I return to Gortash's body and take the second Netherstone for myself, and now the only thing standing in my way is Orin, the Chosen of Baal.
We must find her and take it from her.
After taking out Sarevok, the big bad from the previous Baldur's Gate games, Squidward cracked open the giant stone doors leading into the Temple of Baal, ready to face his final test. Upon arriving at Murderer HQ, we see a suspicious-looking circular arena with Orin at its center, surrounded by her fellow ballists. Using my unparalleled powers of deduction, I quickly realized that this was one of those boss fights that kick off the moment you step too close. So instead of walking straight into the death zone, I decided to take the scenic route around the backside and see if I could catch them off guard. I ended up in Orin's bedroom, which I guess is quite convenient for a cult leader to have your sleeping quarters right next to your sacrificial altar. We begin to speak with Orin's dead mom, and we find out some juicy details regarding Orin's troubled upbringing that we could maybe weaponize against her in the battle to come. I steeled my nerves and sent Squidward up the flight of stairs to initiate the final fight. Orin begins to monologue about how Gortash getting wrecked was good, but Squidward clapping Sarevok's cheeks was a bridge too far. I decided to wage a bit of psychological warfare and casually drop the bomb that it was actually Bal who ordered her mom to kill her as a kid. Since it was the truth, I didn't even need to roll for deception. Squidward's words clearly got under Orin's skin. And like any good high school bully, I decided to twist the knife a little bit deeper by sprinkling in some lies about how Sarevok thinks she's a total joke. This seems to have done the trick, and Orin's mental gets completely fried. But before I can celebrate, her evil dad gets involved and transforms her into a big and nasty monster that wants to dice Squidward into sashimi. The battle against Bal's Chosen finally begins, and the cultist circle begins their ominous chanting, empowering Orin with 12 stacks of damage negation. I couldn't help but notice that the murderous squire was precariously close to the edge of the arena, and of course, Squidward always comes prepared to blow people away. I drop a pair of barrels on each side and fly Squidward to the opposite end of the arena, where he can safely shoot a smoke powder arrow in a way that guarantees at least one ballist would bite the dust. I also had Gale's fire myrmidon go up the stairs to blow up the remaining 2 barrels, which took out another cultist. The surviving ballist tried to pull out some shenanigans, but Squidward and Gale shrugged it off. Now it was Monster Orin's turn to act, and she jumps down to greet Squidward's companions and growls menacingly in their faces. As intimidating as this maneuver looked, it actually didn't do much damage, and I was able to immediately launch my counterpunch. I flew Gale up to the center of the arena, where he could cast Cloud Kill on as many bad guys as possible. Next is Mindara and Lae'zel, who shot out as many explosive arrows as possible, trying to bounce the a cappella members off the ledge. The first round is over, and Orin gets her unstoppable buffs reapplied to her from the surviving cultists, while also cursing Squidward with Bal's edict, which instantly kills him if Squidward doesn't kill someone else first. Luckily, all those earlier explosions had already tenderized the meat, so Squidward just brushed aside Bal's silly spell without breaking a sweat. I also dropped 2 more barrels down on the final member of the evil choir to help Lae'zel get a free action point from her elixir of bloodlust on her turn. Orin's final cultist warrior gets toasted by my myrmidon, leaving Bal's daughter as the only real threat. Orin screeches at Gale's elemental friend and then pounces on the incapacitated wizard, bringing him down to half health. It was time for my martial characters to carry. Lae'zel shoots a fire arrow at Squidward's barrels, and a massive explosion tears through the final ballist, and yet he somehow scrapes by with 12 HP. But his status as a survivor wouldn't last that long, as Lae'zel fires another explosive round, finally bringing an end to the Throat Singers. Now the time has come to unleash everything I've got on Orin. I double-clicked on Karabasan's gift, thinking it was the one that would coat Lae'zel's weapon with a paralysis effect, only to find out that my Githyanki is now drunk in battle. I lashed out in frustration with Lae'zel, only to be tail-swiped by Orin's monstrous form. I patched up my melee crew's wounds, and this time with a cooler head, handed Mindara the correct Karabasan bottle, which coated her halberd with a paralysis effect. I slashed at Orin's hideous body and was able to apply the paralyzed condition on her with the first swing. This guaranteed a critical hit on Mindara's extra attack, but Orin still had 10 stacks of unstoppable, which neutralizes almost all of the damage. Squidward shoots out a magic arrow, which counts as multiple instances of damage, and then goes in for a flurry of blows, whittling away the unstoppable stacks. Orin gets her turn skip thanks to the paralysis, which means my heavy hitters can go absolutely wild. Lae'zel is no longer drunk and begins to wail away with reckless abandon. Once there are only 3 unstoppable stacks left, I switch over to Gale to cast magic missiles, which shred away the remaining defensive layers. Now all those free crits will start finally paying dividends, and it begins with Lae'zel's trip attack maneuver that sits Orin down, giving advantage to my subsequent melee attacks. With natural 20s being guaranteed, I give Mindara the honor of finishing off the last of the Chosen with a level 3 Divine Smite, sending Orin straight to the Shadow Realm.
A metallic tang fills the air as the Slayer's form is drained of life. Ashes to ashes, blood to blood.
Squidward collects the final Netherstone, and the Emperor shows up for the afterparty. The magic rock sends me a vision of the big bulging brain slumbering beneath Baldur's Gate. I turn to the Emperor and ask if we're finally ready to take down the Absolute. He shrugs and says, yeah, probably, which is good enough for me. As we rapidly approach the final act of our grand journey through Honor Mode, I made sure to check off the last few items on my bucket list before the big battle that will decide the fate of Baldur's Gate. I make sure that my supply of potions, scrolls, and magical arrows is fully stocked with one final sweep through the city's vendors, courtesy of Squidward's sticky finger tentacles. But speaking of tentacles, I felt that it was about time for some squid on squid action with the Emperor. Such a long and arduous journey for Squidward deserves exotic recompense. And while I feel a little bit sorry for Mindara, it's always bros before hoes.
The tentacles are getting all up in his ass.
After an active night of rest, it was now the beginning of the end. It's time to take the plunge and cram all 4 of our heroes on a tiny wooden rowboat to do battle with a massive brain. As we rowed our boat gently down the stream, we were met with a not-so-merry stalactite that sank our battleship. Our intrepid band of swimmers made their way to shore, only to get their brains blasted by an angry elder brain that seemed to not like our presence. Walking through the morphic pool, we eventually discover a bunch of intellect devourers skittering about. Since we're here on brain-slaying duty, I decided to play things safe and snipe those four-legged pink sponges from afar. Fortunately, it seems that these brains were lobotomized and none of them got angry as their bodies got riddled with holes one by one. This allowed my party to quickly breeze through the fleshy brine pools with effectively no resistance. So far, so good. Squidward and company finally arrive at an ocean of slime, where the brain blasting only seems to intensify both in-game and in my headphones. The Elder Brain is near, and Squidward is ready with all 3 netherstones combined, prepared to face the final boss of Baldur's Gate 3 in its own lair. The giant evil brain emerges from the green goop and delivers a masterclass on villain monologues. It tells us that it's the ultimate 5-head, and everything that has happened so far is according to its calculations. The massive brain then hits us with a dramatic face reveal, locking eyes with Squidward like it just caught him stealing Krabby Patties. Undeterred, Squidward whips out all 3 netherstones, ready to assert dominance over the Elder Brain. Unfortunately, my luck ran dry, and my lack of success prompted the Absolute to continue monologuing about how smart it is. I tried desperately to boost my odds of rolling well, and was able to attach some glowing ropes to the Absolute's head, but the bar for success kept on increasing, and eventually I needed to roll a 99 on my d20 to bring the evil brain to heal. This did not go well at all, and the Absolute shrugged off all my glowing ropes before blasting Squidward away. Thankfully, the Emperor was there to catch Squidward before rudely shunting him into the astral prism. Now with Squidward and friends out of the way, the Absolute gets to freely introduce itself to the residents of Baldur's Gate. As the giant brain cracks the earth and floats into the sky, it summons its fleet of nautiloids and begins to activate the sleeper agent tadpoles inside the heads of unsuspecting civilians, turning them into an army of mind flayers that begin to feast on an endless supply of fresh brains. Back in the astral prism, the Emperor tells us that the Netherese crown the Absolute is wearing has caused it to evolve into a nether brain. This evil think tank turned out to be bigger and slimier than expected, forcing our bruised and battered protagonists to retreat, regroup, and reconsider. After some hemming and hawing, the Emperor decides to lay all the blame at Squidward's feet.
The problem was you.
Telling him that he is a numbskull without any real tentacles. The Emperor then casually drops that he wants our netherstones for himself and plans to be the hero of this story right after assimilating Orpheus's powers. Squidward then seizes the moment to ask the real question on everyone's mind. Can he acquire a few more tentacles and finally ascend into the handsome Giga-Chad he was always destined to be? Lae'zel is feeling a certain way about snacking on the Githyanki Prince, but complaining is what she does best, so Squidward shrugs off all the drama and initiates the final step of his cephalopodic glow-up. Well, the tentacles might still be in their awkward growth phase, but hey, they say size isn't everything, it's all about how you wield them. And rest assured, Squidward is more than ready to put his new appendages to work.
Yeah, boy.
But before we could chow down, Lae'zel threw a tantrum, forcing Squidward to destroy her with facts and logic. Now, with the implicit support of the peanut gallery, Squidward is free to fill his belly with a protein-rich meal and absorb the silent gains to have a fighting chance against the Netherbrain. We portal out of the astral prism and find a city aflame. Baldur's Gate is in ruins, with the forces of the Absolute on the warpath, and Githyanki dragon riders trying to spit roast their spaceships. The Netherbrain looms overhead, its grotesque tendrils twitching with anticipation as it beckons Squidward towards the grand finale of our honor mode campaign. As the world falls apart, the fully evolved Squidward finds himself interrupting an impassioned speech by some guy I've never seen, but surrounded by familiar faces. It seems all of Squidward's wildly incompatible allies have come together for one final group pep talk, like a dysfunctional family reunion, before we charge headfirst into the gates of hell. The crowd falls silent, expecting a rousing call to arms, and Squidward, channeling his best Winston Churchill impression, begins to speak of liberty, resistance, and the fight for a future free of psychic overlords. But as the words echo through the camp, it's hard to ignore the fact that their would-be liberator is now sporting a fresh set of twitching tentacles. Fortunately, the Emperor has my back and decides to brain blast the crowd into giving us a standing ovation.
Well said.
Squidward and friends march towards the High Hall courtyard, where we sneakily scout out the situation and realize that the Absolutists have completely taken over. To reach the Netherbrain, we're gonna have to punch our way through this gauntlet. I decide that the high ground is where I want to be and climb up a conveniently placed ladder. Unfortunately, it's tough trying to manage all of my summons, and one of my earth elementals gets seen by the cultists. But the forces of the Absolute are spread out all over the place, and all of my heavy hitters are close to a bunch of squishy targets, allowing my squad to cleave a path forward without much resistance. This also happened to be the perfect perfect opportunity for Squidward to flex his freshly grown limbs and take his new powers out for a spin. Eventually, Squidward meets an angry eyeball with legendary actions, but despite its glaring presence, it was no match for the new and improved Squidward, who extracted his brain, deleting the spectator in a single turn. Squidward is no longer the meat shield that takes punches for the team. He is now an industrial-grade meat grinder, a predator whose caloric intake is measured with the souls of the damned. After blasting through the last of the courtyard gauntlet, we finally enter the High Hall, where the brainstem of the Netherbrain is planted. As Squidward and company ascend into the Shattered Tower, their upwards momentum is interrupted by the unmistakable whir of a nautiloid gunship. The squid ship looms overhead, its cannon swiveling towards our hapless party members. Squidward starts spamming his new favorite party trick of summoning black holes. Enemies get yoinked into oblivion faster than they can finish screaming, and the path forward clears itself. We make it to the summit in record time, avoiding the worst of the psionic artillery as red dragons take down the nautiloid ship for us. Squidward and friends then stumble upon a much more exposed segment of the Netherbrain's uncomfortably long brainstem, which then tries to buy Squidward's loyalty, but Mr. Tentacles has sworn off the 9-to-5 grind and is never going to be a wage slave ever again. In order to defeat the Netherbrain, we've got to reach its crown, but instead of using our magic to fly up, we begin to scale the slimy brainstem on foot. The Netherbrain decides to make our final trek a bit more dramatic by lifting off into the dusty clouds above. Tom Cruise would be proud as we eventually make it to the top of the brain, where we come face to face with the Netherbrain's crown, glowing red to indicate that it's the weak point that we need to target. But of course, the last battle of the game will not be so straightforward, and the Absolute summons its final goon squad to block and prevent us from using our netherstones on the crown. A mind-controlled red dragon decides to join in on the fun, and the battle that will determine the fate of Baldur's Gate commences. The army that is arrayed against us is quite formidable, but Squidward did not come alone. I call forth all of the allies that I've gained over the course of this episode, and suddenly the battlefield is looking a lot better. I sit back and watch as my newly summoned friends do all of the heavy lifting, while I fire off pot shots from the back lines. The dragon decides to toast its own comrades, which helps clean up my initiative order, but the mind flayers perched on the high ground begin to yoink some of my allies. This makes them a big target for Squidward and the gang, and we begin to work our ways towards the enemy's rear guard, breaking the mind flayers' concentration where we can. I crit an oathless wretch into an early grave, and my allies are now completely overrunning the enemies, distracting them as my main strike force closes in on the crown. I wipe away the remaining mind flayers, and now Squidward can freely channel the netherstones without any interruptions. While the dragon enjoys an all-you-can-eat buffet of unfortunate side characters behind us, Squidward takes center stage once again. With a flourish of his wriggly appendages, he cracks open a swirling, sinister portal. On the other side, waiting for us, is the Absolute's face without makeup on, and the final boss of Honor Mode. The brain's will has been weakened and is now chained up with the netherstone's glowing ropes. 450 hit points stand between me and my Steam achievement, but Squidward can't do this alone. I assemble the Avengers within the Netherbrain's psyche, and I finally unveil my trump card. Every single party member has popped an elixir of Cloud Giant Strength, boosting everyone's strength score to 27, allowing me to carry very heavy objects. And you may have already figured it out. It is, of course, my specialty: explosive barrels.
No! It can't be!
All this time, all this heavy ordnance just sitting in my inventory, waiting for this exact moment to guarantee my sweet victory. It doesn't matter that there's a doomsday timer ticking down. It doesn't matter that the Absolute gains immunity to all damage types it took in the previous round, if I can just kill it in my first turn. A wall of explosive barrels now sit against the frontal lobe of the Netherbrain, and Gale, as always, is given the honor of lighting the fuse. That brings our pink foe down to a measly 105 hit points. The Emperor zaps the brain, softening up the tissue for Lae'zel to dive in to finish the job. The hand bombs hit their mark, and the wrinkly menace is finally vanquished.
Impossible. Pain. Fear. Terror. Reconsider. Assess. Implore. Surrender.
But in some ways, this is not the end, merely the first milestone in the rise of something far grander. They say that power abhors a vacuum, and who better to fill the void than a handsome Squidward?
Become absolute!
The chosen have fallen, the brain is enslaved, and the world teeters on the edge. This is what being bold and brash has led to.
Conquer. Rule. Come on!
From humble cashier to conqueror of the world, Squidward Tentacles has truly come a long way.
In my name.
This is but the first conquest. Every realm shall quake at your power. Every tongue shall speak your name in awe. Every god shall perish in your shadow.
Once he was doomed to serve Krabby Patties, now he serves fresh tadpoles for all to relish. No more greedy bosses breathing down his neck, no more fry cooks ruining his life. There is only the sound of solitude in E minor. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've finally done it. I've got both the Jack of all trades and the Faux Hammer achievement unlocked in a single honor mode run. I also got my Shining Honor Golden D20 skin to inflate my ego whenever I play Baldur's Gate 3 in the future. I hope you all enjoyed this 3-part series. If you made it to the end, thank you so much, and consider subscribing to the channel, it'd mean a lot to me. I know episodes 2 and 3 took longer than expected, it took longer for me to make than I expected as well, but I'll be working on getting future videos out more consistently. For everyone who enjoyed the Baldur's Gate 3 content, I'm excited to have you along as the channel explores new games and new experiences with similar format. As always, I hope to see you all next time, but until then, goodbye for now.